Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here and to read with Molly and Mary. Such beautiful work. I was just mesmerized and moved. Sherry, thank you for inviting me. The Loft is an amazing place. I live in Connecticut, but I spent most of my life as a writer in New York and in the city. And I wrote to my husband this morning that there is no analogous place in New York. There's nothing like the Loft anywhere I've ever been that is at once so beautiful, so welcoming, so vibrant, and really just a place where you walk in the door and it feels good to be doing what we're all doing. So thank you for having me. I'm going to read a couple of passages from Still Writing. So Still Writing is It's part memoir and part, I guess I call it my love letter to writers. That's how I thought of it as I was writing it. Like several of my books, I had no intention of writing this book, none at all. I had started a novel that I ended up putting in a drawer that I spoke about with some of the folks here this morning. And then I had started a blog a number of years earlier, and I started a blog because my publisher told me to, not because I had any interest at all in creating a blog. And I thought, well, what can I blog about that will not make me just hate myself, like on a daily basis? And what came to me was that I could blog about the creative process and what it takes to face the blank page and what it takes to do this thing every day. And so I started writing these blog posts. And I started receiving notes from writers who I didn't know were reading the blog, from famous writers, from new writers, and they all pretty much said the same thing, which was, thank you, I needed this today. And I didn't know I was doing anything that anybody needed. And so when I put that novel in the drawer, and I was really thinking, I have no idea what I'm going to do next, it occurred to me that it was probably the only time in my life that I could write a book that people were actually already asking for. Because when we write, we are generally speaking writing into a void, writing a book that the world hasn't asked for in any way. But this was a book that at least some people were saying, they were actually assuming I was writing, which I wasn't. So I decided to write Still Writing, and I never once looked at the blog again as I wrote it. I didn't turn the blog into a book. Blogs are blogs and books are books, and they're just different animals. So it's divided into 3 sections, beginnings, middles, and ends, and I will read you a little bit from each. So the first piece that I'm going to read is called Permission, something we were talking about quite a bit this morning. If you're waiting for the green light, the go-ahead, the reassuring wand to tap your shoulder and anoint you as a writer, you'd better pull out your thermos and folding chair because you're going to be waiting for a good long while. Accountants go to business school, and when they graduate with their degrees, they don't ask themselves whether they have permission to do people's taxes. Lawyers pass the bar, medical students become doctors, academics become professors, all without considering whether or not they have a right to be going to work. But nothing and no one gives us permission to wake up and sit at home staring at a computer screen while everybody else sets their alarm clocks, puts on reasonable attire, and boards the train. No one is counting on us or waiting for whatever we produce. People look at us funny, very, very possibly because we look funny. Strange and out of sync with the rest of the world after spending our days alone in our bathrobes, talking only to our household pets, if at all. I can't imagine what my UPS delivery guy thinks when I crack open the door to sign for a package. There's that weird lady again. My husband, who's been a successful journalist and screenwriter for most of his adult life, was in his 40s before his father stopped asking him when he was going to get. Surely there are advanced degrees in writing and various signifiers that a career might be underway. But ultimately, a writer is someone who writes, and a writer who writes is one who finds a way to give herself permission. The advanced degree is useless in this regard. No writer I know wakes up in the morning and while brushing her teeth thinks, check me out, I have an MFA. Or for that matter, I've published X number of books, or even I've won the Pulitzer Prize. There is no magical place of arrival. There is only the solitary self facing the page. It's strange and challenging, glorious and devastating, this business of being a writer. Every day, a new indignity. I've been thinking about making T-shirts that actually say, every day a new indignity. I think they would do well. I think we could sell them here at the Loft and they would fly off the shelves. Almost every short story you ever see published in the Atlantic Monthly or Harper's has been rejected first by the New Yorker. Actually, in the first draft of that, I kept going and went on about various magazines, and then I realized that people would just get so mad at me, so I just stopped there. But press many of us, including those you'd think might have moved beyond this, and you will discover that we can quote you the most painful passages of our worst reviews. We can give you a list of critics who are dismissive of our work. We'll tell you which judge on which academic committee blackballed us. On some mornings, these rejections, reviews, enemies seem to stand between us and our work like a mutant army. Who are you to give yourself permission to write? They seem to shout. We writers are a thin-skinned, anxious lot and often feel like we're getting away with something, that we're going to be revealed at any moment as the frauds we really are. Whether you are a writer just mustering up your nerve to sign up for your first weekend workshop, or filling out your MFA applications, or one gazing moodily out from a big poster in the window of your local bookstore, you are far from alone in this business of granting yourself the permission to do your work. Masters of the form quake before the page. They often feel hopeless and despairing. They may also fall prey to petty musings. They have days in which they simply can't get out of their own way. But when we give ourselves permission, we move past this. The world once again reveals itself to us. We become open and aware, patient, and ready to receive it. We don't ask why that particular slant of sunlight, snippet of dialogue, old couple walking along the road hand in hand seems to evoke an entire world. We give ourselves permission because we are the only ones who can do so. There's a great expression in 12-step programs. Act as if. Act as if you're a writer. Sit down and begin. Act as if you just might create something beautiful, and by beautiful, I mean something authentic and universal. Don't wait for anyone to tell you it's okay. Take that shimmer and show us our humanity. That's your job. And the next piece I'm going to write, I don't usually read, but I'm going to read this tonight. It's called Tribe. As I write these words, I am, of course, alone. It's the middle of the day, and I've barely stepped outside except to pick up a couple of envelopes full of books and manuscripts that FedEx left on the porch. I have spoken to no one since 7 o'clock this morning. I'm wearing the ratty T-shirt I slept in last night. The house is silent. A crow caws outside my office window. These solitary days are my lifeline. They are the lifeline of every writer I know. We hold on to our solitude, fiercely protect these empty days, but at the same time we long for community. We have no water cooler, no office gossip, no Friday night drinks after work. Well, maybe tonight. No weekend softball game. We're outcasts and loners, more comfortable being out of step than part of a group. If pressed, you'll find that most of us had not pledged sororities or fraternities in college. We don't tend to be members of clubs. We approach themed parties, baby showers, boys' nights out with something like dread. Back when I lived in Brooklyn, our house was in a neighborhood lousy with writers. A quick trip to the corner bodega meant running into writer friends who were out buying a roll of paper towels, sneaking a cigarette. And though from my rural hill it's easy to feel sentimental about those encounters, at the time I recall a certain discomfort on both sides, especially if it was in the midst of a writing day. We liked each other, sure. We might even have a plan to meet later that evening. But right then, we didn't necessarily want to be reminded of each other's existence. We were working. This prickly, oversensitive, socially awkward group of people is my tribe. If you're a writer, they're yours as well. This is why I've never really understood competition and envy among writers. We're competing with ourselves, not with each other. And when we do encounter each other, whether at readings or conferences or online, hopefully we recognize ourselves and the strange existence we all share. We realize that we are a part of the same species and that we need one another to survive. Though we write our books alone, ultimately everything we do involves some collaboration. Every good book you'll ever read has the thumbprints of other writers all over it. As we finish a manuscript, we may find ourselves thinking of who to turn to, who can help us, who will read us with generosity and intelligence and care. From where I sit, I can see a pile of manuscripts and galleys across my office floor. They are books by students, former students, teaching colleagues, friends, and strangers, sent to me for blurbs or with requests to help them find an agent or whatever. I try to help when I can. When the work is good, I'm eager to be a part of ushering it into the world. Nothing excites me more than wonderful writing. It lifts me up. It shows me what is possible. And it makes me feel connected to this larger community of writers in the world. A long time ago, I sent a draft, actual manuscript pages, of an early novel to an idol of mine, the writer Tim O'Brien, whose The Things They Carried is one of my favorite books. I got his address from a friend, wrote him a note, and stuffed my manuscript into a manila envelope. I knew that many writers of his stature had sworn off blurbing, believing the whole process to be corrupted and enervating, a view I sometimes share. I had, in fact, recently received a 5-page, single-spaced, typewritten letter from a well-known American novelist explaining to me his policy of not blurbing. Tim O'Brien and I shared no one in common. He was not a cousin of my best friend's best friend from camp. So I sent off my manuscript with no real hope. A couple of weeks later, I received a thin letter back. I stood in the lobby of my apartment building and ripped open the envelope. "Dear Dani Shapiro," it began. "It is now 3:00 in the morning." I began to cry. "And I have just finished your beautiful book. I can still see the black ink on the plain white sheet of typing paper, the handwritten scrawl. I'm happy to offer a comment." Tim O'Brien had stayed up until 3:00 in the morning reading my manuscript. He opened the envelope, began to read, and kept reading. He had then felt moved to write me back along with precious words of support. These 20 years later, I still have not met Tim O'Brien, but he is a part of my community. I will be forever grateful to him, not only because of his act of generosity to a young writer, but also because he has taught me a lesson I have come to live by. I don't forget what it was like. I reach out a hand when I can. I remind myself every day that it's about the work. I am here in Connecticut. You might be in Missoula, Montana, or Taos, New Mexico, or Portland, Oregon. You're in a cafe, or at a writer's conference, or at your kitchen table. The words have come easily to you today, or you feel like your head is about to explode. You're a household name, or laboring in obscurity. I am here, and you are there, and we are in this thing together. I could stop. Should I stop or should I? No, okay. I'm reading one more. I'm going to read the very end of Still Writing, which will be self-explanatory, and it's the very final little piece, and it's called Still Writing. My friend Mark, a sculptor whose large-scale works in granite and marble have been commissioned by Stanford University and Penn State, whose pieces are in some of the most prominent art collections in the country, and who is a well-respected professor at the New York Academy of Art, pulled me aside at a dinner party. "Somebody just asked me if I was still doing my sculpture thing," he said. I laughed. "I'm serious," he said. "How was I supposed to respond? Are you still doing that brain surgery thing?" I've thought of all the times that I've been asked if I'm still writing. I've been asked this by acquaintances and strangers, even by fans, readers of mine. Still writing? It always felt to me like a shameful thing that I was being asked this, that surely if I had written more books, won more awards, made more money, was better known, I wouldn't be dealing with this question. Still writing? Over the years, I've assumed there must be a point at which this would cease to be asked. After 2 books, 5, 7, after being interviewed on NPR, The Today Show, Oprah, for God's sake. Though I felt protective of my friend, it was a relief, ridiculous though it was, to hear that he had to deal with the same question, as if he might have outgrown it, changed course, gone into law, or opened a fish store instead. I've asked around and discovered that every artist and writer I know contends with a version of this question. It's asked of writers who are household names. It's asked of photographers whose work hangs in the Museum of Modern Art. It's asked of stage actors who have won Tonys, of poets whose work is regularly published in the finest journals. No one who spends her life creating things seems exempt from it. Still writing? Oh, and I'm pretty sure that the person asking it means no harm. It's just an awkward stab at social chit-chat, but best to stick with the weather or the miseries of the college admissions process or the deliciousness of the soup. Still writing? Usually I nod and smile, then quickly change the subject. But here is what I would like to put down my fork and say. Yes, I am. I will write until the day I die or until I am robbed of my capacity to reason. Even if my fingers were to clench and wither, even if I were to go deaf or blind, even if I were unable to move a muscle in my body save for the blink of one eye, I would still write. Writing saved my life. Writing has been my window, flung wide open to this magnificent, chaotic existence, my way of interpreting everything within my grasp. Writing has extended that grasp by pushing me beyond comfort, beyond safety, past my self-perceived limitations. It has softened my heart and hardened my intellect. It has been a privilege. It has whipped my ass. It has burned into me a valuable clarity. It has made me think about suffering, randomness, goodwill, luck, memory, responsibility, and kindness on a daily basis, whether I feel like it or not. It has insisted that I grow up, that I evolve. It has pushed me to get better, to be better. It is my disease and my cure. It has allowed me not only to withstand the losses in my life, but to alter those losses, to chip away at my own bewilderment until I find the pattern in it. Once in a great while, I look up at the sky and think that if my father were alive, maybe he would be proud of me. That if my mother were alive, I might have come up with the words to make her understand. That I am changing what I can. I am reaching a hand out to the dead and to the living and the not yet born. So yes, still writing. Thank you.